This is pertaining to biblical Bible prophecy coming true in the regard of seeing how that these instruments that we hold in our hands is now evolving into the world that will transliterate how the world functions in another few more years. This is just the beginning phases of that in which what is going on.
Following breaking news out of Hong Kong
On the other side of the world. Please watch this.
Police and protesters have broken out again. Tens of thousands of people marched in the same border town where violence broke out last Sunday. Police have not authorized this demonstration. They say protesters are disorderly. Some of those protesters have been throwing objects as riot police fired tear gas, but police are trying to disperse the crowds, and it seems that they are having some success. Let's bring in our Christy Lou Stout following this on the streets of Hong Kong. Christy, what more can you tell us about what you're seeing right now?
I'll give you the state of play. At the moment, there has been an effective police clearance operation that has effectively moved the protesters all the way to this position over here. You see a line of riot police behind me. Also there on the street below, that is where the last group of protesters we're seeing there are in front of a shopping mall where the MTR station of Yuen Long is located. Earlier today, we watched as the riot police moved in using tear gas, rubber bullets, pepper spray to try to push them back. We're also keeping an eye on just what's happening here in the scene behind us. But just to give you the greater context here, George, this is not normal for Hong Kong, but this has become the new normal for Hong Kong. This is the 8th consecutive weekends of protest here in the territory. What started as a single issue peaceful demonstration about the extradition bill has turned into just this ongoing, highly disruptive movement against multiple institutions in Hong Kong, against political institutions, against the chief executive, against the police force. Anger about the triads and their involvement in what happened in Yuen Long last week. That anger came to the scene today when there was this unlawful, unauthorized protest here in Yuen Long in the far north of the city that attracted no official estimate because there was no official organizer, but from what we were able to see, tens of thousands of protesters mobilized and walking through. Now we're seeing the remnants of those protesters. These are the individuals who came prepared, wearing the hard hats, wearing black, the symbol, the color of the protest movement. They came with body armor fashioned out of plastic. They were filling up recycled plastic bottles with water so they can neutralize tear gas canisters as they fall onto the streets. It's become a new form of urban guerrilla warfare taking place in the streets of Hong Kong, a major international financial city, and it's come to this. Back to you.
Christy Lou Stout pointing out again that the protesters are upset about the violence that played out last weekend. They are also upset about the extradition bill. Christy, what is the status of that extradition bill right now?
Bill has effectively been suspended. Carrie Lam, the chief executive of Hong Kong, has called it, quote, dead, but the protesters here want it fully withdrawn. And George, I have to say, that's just one of an increasingly long list of demands from the protesters, and it's moved far beyond the extradition bill. They want an independent inquiry into police response and reaction. They want arrested protesters freed and exonerated. They also want universal suffrage. Earlier today, as I keep an eye on the situation here, pardon me, earlier today I spoke to a group of masked teenage boys. These were 14, 15-year-old boys. Two of them said that their parents didn't even know that they were out here protesting, wearing masks, having the hard hats. They were equipped for this type of action, confrontation with riot police. And I asked them, why do they do this, especially to take part in an unlawful assembly when they risk arrest? They say they want to do this for freedom, for universal suffrage, for the freedom of Hong Kong. That is the feeling here, but also it doesn't matter politically who you talk to, how people here in Hong Kong feel. There's a lot of people who don't agree with what the protesters are doing here, but everyone in Hong Kong agrees that the feeling is that the territory is on a brink of instability in a sense that we have never seen here before in decades. George.
Christy, as far as looking ahead, look, we see what's happening right now. It does seem, as you've pointed out, the police are having success in this dispersing the crowds, clearing the streets. But looking ahead to the next day, are there plans for protests? And is there any indication as to whether those protests would be authorized?
George, there are plans for additional protests tomorrow. In fact, we're planning to cover the protests in the central business district of Hong Kong due to kick off in the afternoon. That to protest the police response to last weekend's protest when tear gas was deployed on the protesters. The police have restricted that protest. They said that it can only take place in Central when originally the protesters wanted to march from Central to Xiongwan. And that's another worrying trend that we're seeing here in Hong Kong, that usually protests would be allowed. But now we're seeing the police pushing back. They did not want the protest that's taken place today in Yalong to take place. This was an unlawful assembly. And tomorrow they put additional restrictions on that protest as well. But this protest movement not expected to die down any soon. As I mentioned earlier, the list of demands from the protesters as this thing drags on. We are in the 8th consecutive week of protests. The longer it goes on, the longer the list of demands goes on. It's hard to see any sort of path of reconciliation at this point.
Christy Lou Stout live for us in Hong Kong following events there. Christy, we'll stay in touch with you along with Anna Corin. You're watching CNN Breaking News. These protests playing out an 8th weekend in Hong Kong. Stand by, more of it after the break.
Do you think things... Welcome to CNN Newsroom. We have breaking news on the streets of Hong Kong. Violent clashes playing out there. Police facing off with protesters at an unauthorized rally. The demonstrators turned out in their thousands to protest last weekend's violence that left dozens of people injured. Some protesters have been seen hurling objects as riot-clad police unleashed tear gas on the crowd. This is the 8th straight weekend of demonstrations in Hong Kong. I want to go straight to that area. Let's bring in CNN's Christy Lou Stout and correspondent Anna Corin, both on the ground in Hong Kong. I want to start first with Anna. We've seen these protesters out since mid-afternoon. You've been amongst it hour after hour. Just tell us what you've been seeing.
A short time ago, I would have said that there's a bit of a lull, only because the riot police, who've been pushing people for the last 600 metres, seem to be having a bit of a break. They are sitting down, preparing for the hours ahead, and that is certainly what it feels like is going to transpire here. On this side, we've got a bit of a two-pronged front from police. The blue flag came up a short time ago saying that they are going to move people on. Now, I want to show you, we are within the immediate contingent, and then a couple hundred metres this way is where the protesters are. And there are thousands of them, Rita, sorry, who, even though they're not supposed to be here, have turned out, and despite the tear gas, despite the riot police pushing people on, they're not moving anywhere. There was a feeling at around 7:30 p.m. It went out on social media that everybody was going to leave, and we did see crowds of people head towards the MTR, the train station, behind us. But it would now seem that the people are milling just behind me.
I want to make a point of the vision that you just seen, which was almost everybody and their brother looking at their cell phones. This is the way that the groups are communicating now with each other. But also the fact that that this is part of biblical Bible prophecy coming true, because you're not going to be able to withhold people on the other side of the pond pertaining to their freedoms, their rights, their thoughts, their beliefs. You're not going to be able to restrain these people over there, just like eventually there'll probably be something on this level that will have an uprising in other communist controlled countries. I don't know exactly when. I don't know exactly how bad that it's going to be, but the fact of the matter is you have so many people that are realizing that this thing called communism that is tying people's hands to the point that they're just walking, talking slaves to whatever ruler that they're under, that people are wising up to this and they're figuring out, you know what? I'd be better off dead than to continue on the life that we're on, pertaining to being nothing but open, free slaves. And that's the reason why we're seeing this protrusion of uprising, that this is just the beginning phases, according to the Bible that I read, that in the last days that there will be perilous times, nation will rise against nation, and that there will be extraordinary events just like this that the Bible has already pre-selected or pre-predicted that are going to occur in these last days. That's the reason why we're seeing such of a flow of people wanting to get out of Honduras and other places of South America and Mexico, is because people do not want to be treated like animals any longer, especially those who have made heyday off of panhandling, off of drugs. They've gotten rich off of the people. And the people now are waking up and realizing, my God, these very people that was burning the candle on both ends, not only was they the ones that was supplying the drugs to us, but they was the ones that was chastising us and putting us in jail and giving us bad records, similar to how they've been doing over here in America, of the recourse of doing the drugs. Eventually there's going to be people that's going to wake up here in America that's going to dismantle this government system that has basically been doing the same. Those who haven't actually been involved directly have been involved indirectly by turning their heads and allowing for this type of behavior to basically come over here and contaminate a nation the way that it's been contaminated. The politicians, every one of them, or I say every one of them, most every one of them, for the past 25 or 30 years that are still in office, should be forced to resign and walk away from their positions, because they have obviously let the American people down by allowing for this to get out of hand the way that it's got out of hand, towards all the drug addiction, all the opioids and narcotics that has basically destroyed the very fundamental fabric of our society. But yet no, they're still up our drawing their pensions and their $75,000 and $80,000 a year pensions. We've got a sheriff right here in Weakley County that's been in power for 33 years, and judges right up underneath them. And if it's going on towards these career politicians that's been sitting on their hands, that's been part of the problem versus part of the solution to the problem, if it's been going on here, don't you think it's going on everywhere else? Sure it is. Sure it is. The American politicians has failed the American people. Just look at 9/11. Look at how they done the deal in other parts of the country towards how that they have been lax in not protecting us. In addition to how that they haven't been protecting us pertaining to cyber, pertaining to the internet, our politicians, our professionals, our thinkers, our experts have let us down. And the American people, I think, knows this, but the American people hasn't done nothing about this. Now, does this mean that I'm going to get out here and formulate some sort of new movement, an uprising? You know, all I can do is plant the seeds. I can put the material out there, and if the general public don't do nothing about the material that I put out there, then it's no longer my fault now, is it? Because I've done my part as a messenger, as a whistleblower. I've done my part now, haven't I? If the people still want to walk around in being disorderly to peace and prosperity and utopia for the past 30 plus years in this area, there's nothing that I can do towards awakening them and trying to see that some of the things, or most of the things, I believe all the things that I'm talking about is in fact true, real. But now to get them to wake up to it, as long as their little life is padded, out of sight, out of mind, you won't hear no big gripes, you won't hear no big complaints. But now you let something erupt in their life, and then, and only then, you might have a different response. That's what's wrong with America. They have been too spoiled. They've been handed all these amenities. And of course, you can't really blame the people for doing that, because it was the politicians once more that let the people down by allowing for all the jobs to go south, by allowing for all the jobs to leave America. So, I mean, it's a formula of catastrophe either way you go whenever you look at how the American politician has failed the American people. Let's watch the rest of this, because it's very intense. And like I said, it's part of biblical Bible prophecy in and of its in existence towards it coming true.
They have taken over the streets. This is the train station in front of us. It's part of a huge shopping complex. As you can see, there are just thousands of people with their helmets, their goggles, and they are ready for what is coming, which will be clashes with police. Police have said they are going to clear people out, and they are doing that quite slowly, using tear gas, using just sheer force. It's, this wall of shields coming down the street. They've come about 600 metres to this point.
It's a conflict against the working class versus the rich class, the hases and the has-nots. Well, obviously, those that has power and has this exchange of political stance, they're not wanting to give in or allow for the has-nots to have an opportunity like they had. So it's a struggle. You're dealing with a struggle between the corrupt and the incorrupt. You're dealing with a struggle with those that are in power versus those that want to become in power. You're dealing with a very, very toxic environment that could escalate, that could actually turn into a type of civil war right over there. And not only are you dealing with problems there, but we're dealing with problems all over the planet. Just like this $22.5 trillion, $22,500 billion deficit that we're dealing with here in America. It's just a matter of time before that's going to score against our credit rating, and we're going to go from a 4-star credit rating to a 3-star credit rating. Well, whenever you go to a 3-star credit rating, what does that mean pertaining to the bull market? That's what that's got to do with, is pertaining to now they're no longer going to be dealing with us on the same level, and the interest rates are going to even become even higher than what they already are. That's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with an insane environment, very, very toxic, that can escalate into what you're seeing right now all over the world. Please, let's watch the rest of this.
But it's just gone 8 p.m. here in Hong Kong. This is very early for this sort of clashes. Normally we see those violent clashes, the use of tear gas much later in the evening, but police have certainly brought it forward. They say that protesters attacked them, throwing bricks, and we have seen bricks that have been pulled up, if you like, from the pavement. They say that they were hit with iron poles, man-made shields, which is why they fired the tear gas. But at the moment, though, Linda, it seems like there is a bit of a lull. We are waiting for the next phase of this protest.
So it sounds like there has been some aggression there already. Do we know if any arrests have been carried out? Because this is an illegal gathering, essentially, as far as police are concerned.
Yeah, that's right. It's an unlawful assembly. Organisers had put in there, issued a permit, asked for a permit to be issued. That was denied by police. And we also understand that protesters are appealing to have their demonstration tomorrow in Central on Hong Kong Island to be approved. That is currently before the Board of Appeals, so that is yet to be authorised either. So there's a very good chance that tomorrow's protest as well on Hong Kong Island will be unauthorised as this one is. But as for protesting, we don't know. It doesn't seem from what we have seen to be any protest. This is just riot police moving the crowds on. But from what we see, the crowds aren't going anywhere at this stage.
No, they certainly seem to be holding their ground there. And these, talk to us about the fact that these are unprecedented. Week after week, 8 weeks running, we're seeing people come out onto the streets of Hong Kong, riot police come out, clashes. Just explain how unusual this is.
We saw that mass demonstration back in 2014. That was the umbrella movement when they were calling for universal suffrage, and that was basically a sit-in. They occupied the streets of Hong Kong, the main artery of Hong Kong. They paralysed the city virtually for 2 months until the riot police moved in. Protesters this time around, who are obviously protesting that very controversial extradition bill, they decided that is not the tactic they're going with. They are going to turn out every single weekend, and it's not just weekends. We're just going to follow the crowds because people seem to be getting up, which could indicate that police are also getting up. And we've heard sirens. The people are mobilising, people are moving. The police are getting up. I'm being told that the police are standing up. So as we saw that blue sign earlier, they were telling people to move. So Linda, it would seem that the riot police, who were sitting down, are now geared up with their shields, moving people on. And they're clearing out these streets. They're clearing out these streets. These residential streets. And now we are here in this main thoroughfare, which is under an overpass. It's in front of the train station, in front of this shopping centre. And this is where everybody is massing. Everybody is massing. And you can hear the riot police, well, there's the riot police hitting their shields.
There they go!
All right, we'll let you head over there, and I just want to bring in Christy Lou Stout right now. Christy, of course, you're a time resident in Hong Kong. Give us some perspective from your point of view, having lived there, the sort of anger that you're seeing on the streets there that is not going away. We're seeing it week after week.
Well, Linda, the anger is palpable, especially at this moment. You're looking at live footage of what looks like the final standoff of today's unlawful march in Yuanlong. The riot police, they were able to effectively push back the protesters. They've now been pushed back to the shopping center where there is the rapid transit MTR located there. You could see the riot police in tactical gear right behind me. I'll give you a timeline of what happened earlier in the day here in Yuanlong in the far north of Hong Kong. At 3 p.m., an unlawful protest kicked off, starting at the playground with its intention to end right over here. The motive and the reasons for it gathering together is to protest the scenes of all-out chaos that we saw last week when those men in white t-shirts came out wielding sticks and metal bars and indiscriminately attacking protesters, passersby, and journalists. 45 people were hospitalized as a result of that. In fact, 3 people we confirmed today are still in hospital 1 week on as a result of that attack. People are also angry because of the way the police responded. They fear that the police responded reluctantly to the assault in Yuanlong last week, and that they weren't able to deploy quickly enough, and they didn't arrest people on the scene. They gathered again today in a protest that was not okayed by the police, an unlawful protest that attracted, on our count, because there's no official organizer, tens of thousands of protesters who came out into the streets. We saw many parts, various spectrum of the demographics here in Hong Kong, old people, young people, even children with families, and also the hardcore elements who are still here tonight, who came prepared. These are the hardcore protesters who the police say engaged in violent acts. That's why they pushed them back, using tear gas, using pepper spray, using rubber bullets. These are the individuals you see in black t-shirts, wearing the yellow and white hard hats, who came prepared with gas masks, with hard hats, with armor made out of plastic. We saw them earlier siphoning water out of a local canal to use and to neutralize tear gas canisters as they would fall out onto the streets. It's a new form of urban guerrilla warfare that's emerged on the streets of Hong Kong because of these hardcore protesters. They have been effectively pushed back by the riot police in tactical gear. You see a line of them right here behind me. They've now been pushed to this area right next to the shopping center against where the mass transit train station is. And now it's after dark, and that's when the fear sets in about what's going to happen next as these hardcore protesters wait out. How are the riot police going to clear them out? And the additional factor, the triads. Of the 12 people who were arrested as a result of last week's brutal assault in Yuanlong, Hong Kong police said 9 of them had links to these criminal gangs or triads. There was a fear that the men in white could return again, bearing sticks and also causing body blows. Those scenes of all chaos that we saw last week. That, of course, is up to speculation. We don't know what happens, but usually it's after dark when things can get really dangerous in Hong Kong during this very dramatic, ongoing summer of protest. Linda.
And Christy, I just want to get more insight into why this is happening, because this started weeks and weeks ago over an extradition bill that would have allowed suspects there to face trial in China. But this anger, it's much more than that now, right?
Absolutely, Linda. What started as a peaceful, single issue, massive protest that kicked off in earnest on June 9th about the controversial extradition bill has evolved and morphed into something altogether different. Yesterday, I was at the sit-in at the Hong Kong International Airport and saw that there were multiple demands that they had. They were demanding not just for the extradition bill to be fully withdrawn, because even though the embattled Chief Executive Carrie Lam says it has not been withdrawn yet, they're also asking for the recharacterization of a June 12th protest, recharacterizing a right to a protest. They want the release of protesters who have been arrested. They want their exoneration as well. They also want an independent inquiry into police response over the last 3 weeks. And they also want universal suffrage. This was something that we heard back in 2014 in the pro-democracy umbrella movement, and yet that's come up again. Linda, earlier today, I spoke to a group of protesters, mass protesters who came prepared. They had the hard hats, wearing all black. They were covering their identities. They were 14 and 15 years old. They were middle school students. I asked them if their parents knew if they were there. Two of the boys, they were boys, said no. One of the boys, pardon me, said that his parents did not know. But the reason why they were there was for freedom. And as the police clearance operation happened earlier today, we would hear those chants of liberate Hong Kong, revolution. This protest has turned into so many different things to many different people. But one thing that everyone in Hong Kong can agree upon, the reputation of this city as a stable international financial center has been fundamentally changed, and it's really difficult to see a climb down from this, how there could be any form of reconciliation after scenes that we see like this play out this evening again in Yuanlong and across the city. And that's another point I wanted to make, Linda, is just the geographic, the widening of the protest movement as well, how it started first maybe in Causeway Bay, the central business district on Hong Kong Island, but over the past few weeks, and this is the 8th consecutive week of protests, it's been here in Yuanlong in the New Territories, the far north of Hong Kong. We're closer to mainland China than the central business district. It has extended to Shatin in the Kowloon, other areas as well. This is a protest that is massive, highly disruptive, ongoing, and it's been going on for 8 weeks now.
It's an uprising. What we're seeing here is a historical uprising in the sense of history being made. And as I said a while ago, it's all about the little gizmos and gadgets that people's got in their hands towards understanding that there is a better life, which is the life of democracy, to where we can pick and choose and to where we can vote in and out people that are not doing their jobs or people that has better ideals. This is probably going to be the new norm for the next several years on this planet Earth, that we're going to visually witness as it escalates from one nation, from one country to another. And once more, this is only the fulfillment of biblical Bible prophecy that Christ talked about, that in the last days that perilous times would come, and that nation would rise against nation, and that there would be disturbances such as man has never seen before. We're now in that phase. So hang on. It looks like the ride may very well get a little rougher before we can finally start straightening things out and seeing peace and prosperity, a utopia that, yes, the Bible did in fact predict thousands of years ago. I can't enforce my ideology upon people. For the past 30 years, they've had the opportunity that they could have gotten in behind the message of the ministry of the Windmill Ministries missions. They could have gotten in behind it, but obviously these people don't want peace. They like the abortions. They like the divorces. They think that this type of environment is fun here in America, especially in West Tennessee. It's really sad that I've had to struggle for 30 years without having good support teams in behind me. Because I guarantee you, all the stuff that I've been through, I wouldn't have had to have went through if I would have had a good, strong support team, a congregation, people that embraced what the Bible teaches and preaches pertaining to the opening of the first seal and the 2 witnesses and all the other stuff that this ministry teaches in support of the Bible. The founder of the ministry never would have gone through this stuff. And I actually look upon the majority of the people around here that they have let me down in that sense. Because I didn't have that, I hate to use the word following, because if you're following me, you're following the wrong person. But I didn't have that support. And because I didn't have that support, I was just out there as a lone wolfer. And because I was out there as a lone wolfer, it made me very, very vulnerable towards being attacked and lied upon and lied to again and again and again. Once more, these are the breaking news events happening over in Hong Kong of the protest rallies that started out being civil that are now becoming uncivil.
A revolution indeed. Incredible 14 and 15-year-olds that are out there. Christy Lou Stout, great to get your perspective. Our thanks also to Anna Cohen. We're not going anywhere. We are going to stay on this story, but we are going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
Thank you for listening, and good luck to all of us. Shalom.